Have you heard about this recent trend, especially in video content, where if you say something and give an opinion and then immediately cut to music, people tend to just assume that whatever you said is completely and totally factually accurate and are more likely to agree with you as a result? It's really interesting stuff. Anyway, ketchup is a sin against God, man, and tomato. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Sounds Good Makes Sense, a discussion show for the World of Warcraft player. My name is Devilor, and today I want to spend a little bit more time talking about the nature and the concepts and some of the frustrations behind limited time rewards in video games. Specifically, I want to explore the idea of how Blizzard, or any game developer really, can keep the concept of limited time rewards and keep the sort of prestige and the badge of honor feeling behind getting something in a limited time when that content is current, without overly frustrating players and feeling like they're forced into doing stuff. There's been a lot of discussion recently. I've talked about this in Search of Answers. I've talked about it a bit in Sounds Good Makes Sense as well. I've just seen this discussion all over the place, especially with the resurgence of things like Mop Remix coming out, things like Plunderstorm coming out, where players are feeling like they're forced to do something for what is ultimately a cosmetic reward. They're feeling like they are pushed into content that they don't want to be doing, but they feel like they have to in order to get this reward. And then obviously the flip side of that conversation as well, with people saying, well, you're not forced to do any of it's literally a cosmetic reward. You're not forced to do anything here. And I've been analyzing that a little bit. I want to really hone in today on that specific concept of limited time rewards that are a result of doing specific content in a video game. So obviously here I'm talking about things like I just mentioned, things like the Plunderstorm rewards, things like the handful of unique rewards from Mop Remix. But this is something that's happened time and time again over the history of World of Warcraft, where there has been some sort of limited time reward that you can't get if you come to that content late. This can be things like mounts or titles from things like raids or PvP, certain achievements that can only be done when that content is still relevant and still current. This is something that's occurred many times over the course of history in World of Warcraft, and in fact, in many different video games. This is often a case where there will be some sort of thing that appears like maybe on the shop or something, or it's in a certain battle pass in a video game, and once that battle pass is gone, you can't get that item anymore. So it's something that's only accessible during a specific time period. And I just want to explore that a little bit more. Now, in order to get started on this, we have to examine, first of all, why these things need to be limited in the first place. Like, why not just leave these things available forever? Why not have a battle pass that you can always go back and finish later on if you want to? Why not have a mount that you can get from completing a raid be something that if you go back in there when you're 20 levels higher than it at 3 or 4 expansions later on, which that math doesn't work out, I know, whatever, it doesn't matter. Why not have this be something that you can go back and get later? And I think the most important argument as to why not is that many of these rewards are there specifically to feel like a tangible and something that people can show off as a badge of honor, as a, yes, I was there. Like, look at this cool thing that I got for doing this content when it was current during its specific time frame. They want it to be something that it really just shows, yes, I was there. Yes, I did this back then. And I've gotten this unique reward as a result that other people can't go back and get now because I'm cooler than they are. It essentially is what it boils down to. They want it to be something that they can show off and say, look at this cool thing that I got that you can't get anymore. And in order for that to be a case, there does need to be that sort of artificial rarity that's put onto it. Like, it's not like a real world thing where it's like, oh, look at this car that I have that they only ever made 1,000 of. Like, this is digital stuff, right? So they can't just be like only 1,000 people. Well, they could. It'd be weird. Only 1,000 people ever get this thing, and then once it's gone, you can't get it anymore. The actual stock of a digital item is a strange concept, and it's a difficult one to really express to people. So I think it does make more sense in a video game context to have that be more along the lines of this slice of time is when you can earn this thing. And once that slice of time is passed, like, everyone could get it during this slice of time, as long as they do the required task or whatever it is, complete the required challenge to be able to get this thing. Once that time has passed, however, this is now no longer available, and it becomes something that people can show off. It becomes something that people can say, like, especially in a game where it's all about like building up your character and collecting items and having these things in your collection. It's important that things that exist inside of a collection can feel somewhat rare, can feel somewhat prestigious, that I even have this thing in the first place. And one of the common counter arguments against that particular viewpoint is like, well, there's feats of strength, right? Why not just have the the feat of strength for, yes, I completed Plunderstorm, or the feat of strength for, yes, I killed this boss, I got cutting edge for this boss or whatever. And I think the important distinction there is that it feels better to have something that is tangible, that you can show off. Specifically something that you can get on this mount and you can ride around on it and people go, ooh, that mount looks cool, I like that. Or you're wearing this like transmog or whatever and people are like, wow, that guy looks super cool. I wish, like, especially months and so on later down the line, once it's no longer the fresh new thing, something that people can look at it and say, wow, that looks cool, I like your transmog, where'd you get it? And then you can be like, haha, I'm super cool because I finished Plunderstorm back then, or I killed this raid boss back when it was difficult, and so on. It's just important for a badge of honor, for some sort of reward that players are given specifically as a encouragement and a reward, and just like a, I don't know, gold star essentially for having done something at a specific time, for having accomplished and defeated some challenge. It's important that that's something that can be visually represented in some way beyond just, you know, looking through someone's achievement list to see if a specific checkbox is marked off, because that's basically what feat of strength end up feeling like, at least to me. The other reason that I think it's important for stuff like this to have this sort of limited availability to it and the limited time that's available to it, not everything, but for some things, it's important to have this limited availability to it, is that frankly, the concept of, oh, I can do that later often leads people to just never doing it in the first place. Like a huge part of the appeal for people who are regularly raiding and constantly raiding and you know, clearing every tier, and they're getting their cutting edge and so on and so forth. A huge part of that motivation is literally that they did it at that time. If there was less of that reason to do it right now, you'd end up like half the games that go unplayed on your Steam list. I'll use a real example mentioning Steam list right now. I own all of the Dishonored games. They look amazing. I've heard so many people say that the Dishonored series is fantastic. I want to play these games. They look fun. I bought them when they were on sale a while back. And I've been like, yes, I really want to play these Dishonored games. But because they're just always sitting there, and because I don't have any particular reason to play them right now versus any of the other things that I do have reason to play right now, it's just kind of something that for me has fallen off the list. Now, obviously, if I was like really heavily invested in going and playing Dishonored, I could do that. And I'm not saying that Steam needs to incorporate some sort of like, haha, you have to play this game right now or else it's going to go away, or something, because that would be weird. Don't do that, Steam. Don't be, if Valve is listening, don't take that note. That's a bad one. It's more just to illustrate what I mean when I say sometimes when you don't have a limited time to do something, it just gets put to the back burner and then you end up never getting around to it, because there's always something else that comes over top of that in terms of priority. Blizzard obviously wants people to look at things like raiding, look at things like Plunderstorm and so on as a huge, exciting new thing, not just because they want it to seem more exciting, but also because getting more players to do it right now is actually important. Like when a new raid tier comes out, they need to have as many people wanting to raid as possible so that guilds can recruit and that groups can form and so on. Same for Plunderstorm. Honestly, same for Mop Remix in a lot of different ways. Having players gravitate towards the new thing and giving a real incentive for them to be like, right now is when you want to do this. You don't want to try and come back to this later. Right now is when you want to do this. It does help motivate people to do it, so that then there's, especially in a multiplayer game, other people to play with. Now, all that being said, I don't think those like prestige rewards, those badge of honor rewards, etc., I don't think those need to be a lot. I think ultimately like one or two things like a mount or a title or something like that historically has been more than enough to motivate people to do something while it's current. I remember wiping repeatedly and getting super frustrated over every wipe that occurred back in the Wrath of the Lich King days when we were trying to get the Undying and the Immortal achievements for having cleared Naxxramas without a single death on any boss fights. That was stuff that we put significant effort into, and that's literally just like 12 characters on the screen, like 12 individual letters on the screen is the result of that. But it's still something that we wanted because it was a limited time thing and because we felt like it was worth that effort at that moment in time. We don't need to have, like, Plunderstorm ended up with like 50 different rewards. We don't need that number of different things available as a unique reward to still get that motivation. And Mop Remix, I think, actually handles this pretty well. There's a ton of things you can get from Mop Remix, but only a handful of those are actually unique to Mop Remix itself. And if you really just want to get in there, get those things, and then stop playing, it doesn't actually take too much effort to get those things. The rest of the rewards available in Mop Remix are mostly stuff that you could still go farm today in retail if you wanted to. You could still go get them in Dragonflight if you wanted to. Mop Remix just gives a little bit easier of a method to get those things, which ends up being really cool and was one of the things that I really like about Mop Remix. If I wanted those rewards more, I would probably be playing a lot more Mop Remix, but none of them really are exciting to me. That's just personal taste at this point. I really like the way that they've done it with Mop Remix, where there's a handful of unique things that you can only get for this. And then most of the rest of the stuff they know is going to, and is going to be available through some other means. So for the course of the rest of this discussion, I kind of want to use Plunderstorm as our example. And the reason I'm being clear about that I'm using Plunderstorm as the example here is because I want to make sure it's understood. I'm not just talking about the Plunderstorm rewards. I'm talking about conceptually, how can a limited time event like Plunderstorm continue to have its rewards be spread out maybe a little bit more in the future, or how can they approach this for future iterations of stuff like Plunderstorm? This would also apply to things like if there was like 50 unique rewards that they wanted to give from a raid instance, for example, or there was like some PvP season where they're like, yes, this PvP season is the run where we're going to really throw tons of rewards at this PvP season so that there's lots that you can get. How could they then consider maybe making some of that stuff more accessible to players? Not all of it, but some of that stuff more accessible to players in the future. Again, we're going to use Plunderstorm as the example here because this is the one that most people have been talking about recently. And this is the one that I think serves as the greatest like case study, at least in recent times. So let's start by looking back to the history of World of Warcraft and different ways that rewards like this have been, or just rewards in general, have been brought back in future times or have been spread out beyond where they necessarily were originally earned. And look at some of those examples. The first one that immediately comes to mind for me, at least, is the Amani Warbear from back during the Burning Crusade. There was the Zulaman raid instance where if you completed it in a certain amount of time, you got one of this like special mount. It was a Amani Warbear. It's this cool red bear. It's really great. I have one because we used to farm them back in the day. But it's this cool red bear, and it was like the only way to get that. And then once Burning Crusade was no longer relevant, once Wrath of the Lich King came out, it went away, and you could not get the Amani Warbear anymore. Now, eventually, much later on, I believe it was during Cataclysm, actually, when they brought back Zul'Gurub and Zulaman and made them essentially into 5-player instances, they added the Amani Warbear back in. But what they did was they made it a recolor. They made it a slightly different shade of red. It ends up looking a little bit more pink as the Amani Warbear recolor. They call it the Amani Battle Bear, I think is the new name for it. And I actually, off the top of my head, now that I'm talking through this, I don't remember if the Amani Battle Bear is even still available or not. But this is one example of a way in which something like the Plunderstorm rewards could be brought back in the future if they wanted to keep the uniqueness of the original models and still have some way that you could get a pirate transmog, like a bear mount, like it was with the Amani Battle Bear. They could consider that sort of thing. The downsides of the recolors approach, first of all, it always is kind of very divisive on whether or not the recolor is different enough from the original or if it's too different from the original. A lot of times in the past, we've seen like armor sets come out where the recolor hits and people are like, well, dang, the recolor is actually cooler than the original one. And this doesn't look so much different that I don't want both of them. One that comes to mind for me on that was the like purple version of the Judgment tier set that I think was available during the Wrath of the Lich King pre-patch event. I don't actually remember exactly when that came. I think it was Wrath of the Lich King pre-patch event. But there's been different versions of the Judgment tier set that have been available over the years, the Paladin Judgment tier set, tier 2, that people have looked at and been like, oh, this is so cool. I really want the purple version, or I really want the white version of this that come out. That can be a case where the new one coming out almost in some ways makes the old one feel less cool because now, well, this new one just looks cooler. And then obviously the other side of that coin is the Amani Battle Bear, where people were like, this bear looks awful. Like the feeling at the time was that the Amani Battle Bear looked like a slightly sickly version of the Amani Warbear because the coloration that they chose for it's mostly just pink, and it was a little bit weird, and people just didn't like it as much, to the point where that recolor didn't really feel like bringing back the Amani Warbear so much as it felt like, here's your like, yeah, people have been asking for this and demanding this, so I guess here you go sort of thing. Now, that's not to say that recolors aren't a good way to bring stuff like that back, just pointing out one of the negative effects that can often happen with it. Another obvious example for how these rewards could be made available again is, well, we assume they're going to do Plunderstorm again at some point in the future. There was even talks during the first run of Plunderstorm of like, oh, here's some ideas that we might want to do if and when we bring this back again in the future, maybe different maps, different abilities and stuff like that, which I think would be really cool. So obviously, if Plunderstorm is going to come around again at some point in the future, they could just make these same rewards available again. That also comes with some potential downsides. One is that it still means you have to do Plunderstorm in order to get them, which for a lot of people, having to do Plunderstorm was the reason that they were so frustrated because they didn't like Plunderstorm. But there's also like, even for the people who love Plunderstorm, like myself, it would kind of suck to have a new Plunderstorm season or whatever you want to call it come out, and all the rewards are the same stuff that I've already got. Like if I already completed the Renown track during the original run of Plunderstorm, it would suck to have a new run of Plunderstorm and it's just, hey, now you have another shot to earn these same things again. I would want to have something, like I would still play it because I liked Plunderstorm, but I would want to have something that I could earn, which then also means like, well, okay, maybe it could be some of the rewards, or maybe they could like flatten the previous rewards into the first like few bits on the round track and then do new stuff later on or something like that. There's ways to solve that. Again, just sort of illustrating one of the potential hurdles that they would have to accomplish, or that they would have to overtake, I should say. Another approach that is potentially worth mentioning, or at least considering here, is that maybe they don't bring these rewards back at all. Maybe this stays as something that's unique to Plunderstorm. Maybe the unique rewards from Mop Remix stay unique to Mop Remix. But the idea of having something that you could look to on the horizon as something coming soon, so that, yes, I missed out on those rewards, but there's going to be some cool stuff coming up again soon. I can go and get that instead. This is sort of how it used to work with things like the mounts from raids or like raid achievements. Like, again, looking back to Wrath of the Lich King, it's just an era that comes to mind for me on this stuff a lot. There was the Glory of the Ulduar Raider and so on achievements that you could get, where if you got all of these things done inside the span of that raid tier, you got an achievement and that gave you a mount. But once that raid tier was no longer relevant, like once we moved on from Ulduar, actually I think Ulduar stuck around for a while, but Naxxramas at the very least, once we moved on from Naxxramas, the mount that was available through Naxxramas went away and you weren't able to get that one anymore. That's the sort of idea that could have merit in the future. The concept, and this has been the same, by the way, for like gladiator mounts for a long time in PvP, where if you don't get the mount inside of a given season, you just don't get that mount. But you know that next season you have another shot to get another mount. There's something else that's going to come in the next season. So if you missed out on this one, maybe you can get the one next time. And that's something that can work as long as it's regular enough, as long as this is content that is so common and so readily available that you can look at something and say, oh, I'm going to miss this one. That kind of sucks, but I'll get the next one. That can work. I don't know that that would work for something specifically like Plunderstorm, just because the amount of rewards that are in there is kind of a lot. They'd have to be cranking out so many rewards constantly. The art team would get very overworked as a result. But that's another concept that I thought was worth mentioning as we're just holistically discussing the concept of limited time rewards. The more common these limited time things are, the less it feels frustrating to miss out on one of them. You still want them all, but you feel less frustrated by missing one. But all of those suggestions and all of those historical methods aside, I actually think Blizzard is in a really, really good position to do something really cool with the Plunderstorm rewards and with similar limited time rewards and like big batches of rewards going ahead in the future. And that is put them on the trading post. Now, I don't think they should put all of them on the trading post, and I don't think they should even put a batch of them all at once on the trading post. Keep some of the rewards from Plunderstorm unique to Plunderstorm. If you didn't play Plunderstorm, you don't get them, and that to me is things like the couple of the mounts, maybe the Pepe, maybe like the hat from the biggest thing or whatever. I don't remember all of the Plunderstorm rewards off the top of my head right now, but keep some of those unique to Plunderstorm. You only got them if you did that, but take a lot of the individual cosmetic items, like like the cutlass or the some of the different armor pieces that you could wear and so on, and put some of those on the trading post just from time to time. Like maybe the hat shows up one day, and then maybe the spear or whatever it was shows up one day, or the pistol and so on. Have these be things that appear slowly over time on the trading post. And here's why I really like this concept and why I think this could be a great way for Blizzard to continue to have these big, meaningful batches of rewards that are unique to a specific type of content or a limited time event or whatever when it comes out. without having to overly put too much into forcing people to do all that content if they want to get all those rewards. The reason that I like this is, there's a few advantages. One is it still ends up being a big advantage for the people that, honestly, all of it really boils down to, it still ends up being a really big advantage for the people who put the effort into that type of content. So if you went through Plunderstorm, you finished the Renown track, you still have a really big advantage over everyone else, because not only do you just already have all of the stuff, but now you don't need to worry about spending tender on it when it hits up on the trading post. You don't need to look at this and decide. You never have to think about, do I want to get the pirate coat or do I want to get this other new thing that's on the trading post? It still means that there is a significant benefit and reward for having completed the Plunderstorm reward track when it was relevant. But someone who just really hates Plunderstorm can still look at this stuff and say, okay, maybe eventually I'll be able to buy some of this on the trading post. So I'm not going to make myself suffer through something I don't want to do, and thus end up hating World of Warcraft as a result, and just really getting burned out on doing something they don't want to be enjoying. They won't enjoy. And that still gives some way for them to maybe get these cosmetic items in the future. Because again, to me, the biggest sort of flaw that having all of these limited rewards, especially for something like Plunderstorm, which is a PvP mode, and PvP modes tend to be very divisive. The biggest flaw isn't that there was something unique to Plunderstorm. The biggest flaw isn't that Plunderstorm had rewards. The flaw was that people who did not want to play this game mode, but really liked the cosmetic items, felt like they had to suffer through content they didn't want to be enjoying in order to get these things that they did want, in order to be able to advance their character in a different game entirely, essentially. In order to get these rewards for a character in a different game, they had to go play Plunderstorm and have a horrible time in the process. And that's the sort of thing that, as a game designer, you really never want people playing your game and hating themselves the entire time. You want it to be fun for everyone who's playing it, and you want people who don't want to play it to feel like they can just not play it. So to me, the idea of putting some stuff like this on the trading post, it feels like a good middle ground. It still is a strong batch of rewards so that everyone who wants to play Plunderstorm, or who is at least okay enough with playing Plunderstorm that they're not going to hate themselves going through it, all of those people can still look at this and say, yep, I'm gonna play that. I'm gonna go jam on this for a long time, and I'm gonna do the best that I can. And then the people who just really didn't want to play Plunderstorm, and who essentially were like, these are the people who were causing problems in matches because they would just drop in, get their immediate quest done, and then run off into the storm and die so that they could do it again. Those people don't even need to touch it in the first place, because they can at least look at this and say, okay, yeah, I'll get it later when it shows up on the trading post. Now, I do think this would require some significant communication from Blizzard on the topic, and they would need to set expectations for which items are going to stay unique and which items aren't, what might show up on the trading post later and what wouldn't. And there's ways that could be done, but there would be some significant, good Lord, some significant effort that needed to be done in order to actually achieve that. But I don't know. I think it's a good idea, and I think it's something that's at least worth considering, and I hope it's something they're already considering. Just again, with the caveat that I don't think absolutely everything from Plunderstorm should be put on the trading post, because it is still important to have some element of my prestige or my whatever it is that you can show off as a player and say, yes, this is something that I got and it's rare and only I have this, or only the people who did this thing have this as a result. And just as a reminder, once again, we're using Plunderstorm here as a case study, not necessarily like the whole topic, and the point isn't just the Plunderstorm rewards. This is more a case study of how could this thing be approached in the future. So even if the Plunderstorm rewards end up all staying as they are, I still think this is the sort of thing that Blizzard could look at and potentially consider for future limited time events. Maybe something where they say, okay, these are the items that are going to be unique to this reward track. These are the items that may show up on the traders post or the trading post at some point, but we're not going to tell you when. And it's like, put a gap of time in there too. Make sure there's a decent chunk of time in between them showing up and the event having actually ended. I don't know, just some food for thought, I suppose, in general. I thought it was an interesting topic worth getting into, and I decided to ramble about it, because that's what I do here on Sounds Good Makes Sense, is I ramble about things. On which note, I will wrap up for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Once again, as a reminder, please do check out my Patreon. That is patreon.com/Devilore. I do also have devilore.com, which is where you can check out some of the Sounds Good Makes Sense merch, like this super cool, very awesome mug here, which I've been a big fan of. I've been using that almost every day. But yes, patreon.com/devilore or devilore.com. Check out both of those. And there's also a link to Patreon on devilore.com. So you really just devilore.com. That's kind of the important one here. But thank you so much once again to my patrons for all the support and helping keep this going. It's really, honestly, it's YouTube is hard. So getting back into it has been rough, and seeing all the support from patrons has really helped me stay motivated and keep this thing going. Yeah, I guess I'm done talking now. We've reached the end of the video, the point where I stop talking. All I have to do is stop talking. That's very difficult for me to just stop talking. I suppose I should say something like, thanks again, everybody, for watching. I'll see you later.